What up, Pittsburgh Steelers fans? Matty here with another episode of Steelers Touching Under. Today we are talking Steelers salary cap, giving you a salary cap update. Now, look, I know everyone's talking about minicamp. Minicamps, all those good things. We had all the Arthur Smith offense sort of stuff out there. We had Mike Tomlin being interviewed since his first contract. He sort of didn't really want to talk about it. We also had a lot of the players taking shape. We've kind of had that a little bit going on through organized team activities, OTAs anyway. I just want to cover something a bit different. Now, you people know that I like to think about we have the War Room series, which this will fit into, which is really around thinking about a GM perspective. There were some scouting changes as well, and some front office changes. There were some changes to area scouts. Their Bledsoe scouts as well, which is based on like one of the big scouting agencies. They sort of embed someone within the Steelers that covers people, including the Bledsoe one is Bears, Lions. It counts Steelers, Titans. I'm having them to blank on one of the others as well. But really kind of interesting from that perspective with that sort of scouting side of things. You saw one of the blokes being Randy White brought in one of his fellow guys as well. So there were some front office changes that have sort of happened recently as well for Steel fans to be aware of. But I wanted to talk about salary cap because it kind of relates to player movements and what we're seeing in organized, what we saw at organized team activities, what you'll see at minicamp, and what you might even see in training camp. So as everyone knows, I like to use over the cap wherever possible, over spot rack. So the first thing to note about the Steelers is obviously the Steelers side of things. You have a situation where the top right now of the salary cap is obviously goes across until the season starts. Your top 51 players. Anyone below that is considered displacements. So right now the Steelers have $216 million in their spending on their cap on their top 51 players. Their team cap space then is available of $15.876 million. We kind of know that when it comes to the Steelers, they like to keep anywhere between $6 and $8 million to do business through the season. So really, they've got about $7 million. And there's still some restructures that they can do as well. I'm not going to get into all those today in terms of salary cap space. Do I think the Steelers can afford Brandon Ayuk? Not really. Yes, they can make it happen. Is it realistic? No, not really. But there is some things that they can do. And the reason why I want to talk about that is because there are going to be players that are going to be cut. There are going to be guys where teams go, hey, that rookie's doing really well, or that acquisition we had might not be the second on the depth chart. Maybe they're vying for a first-team spot. Maybe we'll move someone. There's plenty of other cuttable players for the Steelers right now. But one thing to note that was interesting that I looked at when I looked at NFL team texture and roster breakdown, and this is obviously for those that are able to see it on there, whether you're watching on your phones, your TVs, your laptops, your iPads, whatever it is, or Galaxy tabs, whatever it is. There's a lot of colors, there's a lot of there's a lot of numbers, there's a lot of columns and rows and all that sort of stuff. But really, the dead money is really interesting. So the Steelers have $24 million in dead money right now on their cap. That's 9.4% of their actual cap. Overall, that's actually 18th in dollar value and 17th in the league in terms of percentage of their cap that's being spent. Now, if you look at, that's a lot less than their elite player percentage based on overall contracts. Middle player percentage, it's more than their lower. Steelers actually spend an interesting percentage of their cap on rookies. That's really, really good. And the cap spaces, they've still got about 6% of their cap space, which we know they'll keep about 3%. They'll probably keep about half that $15 million to do the general business through the season. So that's kind of interesting. Now, if you look at the top teams on that list, it's the Denver Broncos. They have about $67 million in dead cap. And also, if you look at the Bills, I think were the second. They were the team that had the second most. I think they had. I think theirs was like 61 million. Yeah, 61 million. So they're second on the list in dead cap money. Obviously, a lot of that's related to Stephon Diggs in terms of their dead cap. Obviously, for the Denver Broncos, a lot of their money is associated in paying the Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback in Russell Wilson. All right, now obviously Cam Heyward. Let's kick off with Cam Heyward discussion. Now, Cam Heyward obviously is going into the final year. We've seen him miss a bit of organized team activities. We may do a holdout in training camp. We're yet to see that. We have seen him rock up for some mini camp stuff as well. But what that looks like, whether it's a hold in, what have you. What I thought you Steelers fans out there might be interested in is actually, and let's bring it up. It's going to give me an ad instead. So I'm going to hit refresh. I love doing this. Cool. Cam Heyward is actually right now on the list in the top 10 best players paid at the interior defensive line position. In fact, he is number, I think I had it 8th on the list. Yeah, 8th on the list. But after this season, because this doesn't include this season's earnings, just his career earnings to date, he will actually move up the board all the way under Leonard Williams there. Actually, no, he'll move ahead of Leonard Williams to stay with the 22 million. So he'll be the 4th highest paid interior defensive lineman ever. Now, there are a lot of Steelers fans out there that are like, Cam doesn't need $22 million a year. But at least, regardless, we want Cam to win a Super Bowl. We want Cam to do really, really well. He should really, by the end of his career, no matter whether it's in Pittsburgh or elsewhere, should finish only behind Aaron Donald and Ndamukong Suh there for the most amount of money earned in his career. Now, that's kind of interesting if he does play with the Steelers, because if you look at anyone that's looking at the visual to the right of my screen, probably the left than yours, and way the opposite, most of these guys have played with different teams, whereas Fletcher Cox, he made $128 million over the course of his career, all with the Eagles, and Aaron Donald, $157 million. Cam Heyward, if he played another 2 or 3 seasons, maybe makes more than Aaron Donald, but probably not. But there's some big names here. There's some guys that are doing pretty well. Now, look, Chris Jones probably will play longer. DeForest Buckner's probably going to play longer. Leonard Williams, we'll have to see. But he's he's an interior guy on a 4-3. We'd probably more call him a defensive end if he was playing in the Steelers defensive scheme. But it is interesting when you look at player contracts. Cam certainly made quite a bit of money in his day, and he so deserved that. I'm not questioning that at all. But that gives you, I just thought it was a fun fact when I was having a look at it. Continuing breaking it down, Larry Ogunjobi. He's the guy I want to talk about particularly that sort of made me think about doing this show. Larry O is probably, look, his dead cap post-June. We're now at that phase. So that means whether you're cutting him or whether you're trading him as well, because his trade one was the same, I think, with the $8 million. No, trade because it was the bonus moves down to $3 million. But whether teams would actually trade for him, I don't think so. They don't want to take the $13 million cap hit. But if you cut him, you're facing an $8 million cap hit, but you save $5 million. Now, Larry Ogunjobi is going to be very expensive to replace, particularly when Benton is the only real guy on his rookie contract that you can rely upon. I'm really hopeful of Logan Lee. But the guy was taken, in the 6th round. We've got to see what he develops as. Loudermilk is not someone that's more than 3rd or 4th on the depth chart if he can even make it beyond the practice squad. Liao, we do not know what we're going to get in Liao. He's been disappointing to date. And obviously you've got Lowry in there. I think Lowry could be more impactful over the season, but that's a big thing to rest on his shoulders. But also having $5 million in cap right now, plus what you've got with the $15 million. Obviously, remember as well with the 53 players, we're going to have a best part of $1.5 million, $2 million extra taken off that. So that 13, take that off the 15. Let's take it off the 15 million. Yeah, the 15.8 million. Let's take $2 million off your 13.8. Then you take $8 million off or so for them to do business during the season. You're kind of sitting there at about $5 million. So having another $5 million and $10 million to pick up a wide receiver that gets cut from another team that's decent to be a wide receiver 2, which is a lot of people saying is the position, or even another good corner, that could be really valuable. So, Larry Ogunjobi, if you can get a trade for him as well, that's an interesting target for you. Also, James Daniels and Siamalu. Siamalu, particularly if you were to do, James Daniels, if you were to do a trade, I don't think the Steelers would do that though. It's not really worth it, really, to be honest. So there should be a trade post-June one. But yeah, it doesn't really help you, to be honest. I don't know why you'd want to do that. But if you did sort of move him on, again, I don't see it. I don't see it with Siamalu. They've obviously got rookie tackles. They don't want to do that. Cole Holcomb, then there were some articles about this, could be on the chopping block, but at the same time, he's contracted beyond this year. And $7 million for a guy that could be one of the league's best 2s or even 3s behind Peyton Wilson at linebacker, particularly you've got Payson Wilson on a rookie deal, and Atlanta Roberts you've got like you're paying less than $4 million a year, that's pretty cheap. Like linebackers, a really good linebacker with Queen, having 4 starter capable guys, even if Cole Holcomb misses the first 4 to 6 weeks, that's very, very cheap. And so I actually would be more for cutting Ogunjobi, even though we're a little bit thinner there, than I would Cole Holcomb because of how important the linebackers are going to be and how much they can let particularly with the rookie, a lot of rookie or younger, more inexperienced cornerbacks, having the linebackers really solidified as that second layer of the defense, I think is really important. Then you also got the situation when we go down the list. Donte Jackson, they've already done the restructures there. You're not going to see anything. You're not going to see anything with him. Nate Herbig is probably the next one on my list that I think I really could. I've said he could be. He's cuttable for a while. So that's kind of interesting when you look at the only the $1.4 million dead cap hit and adding $4 million to it. That's quite possible there. Don't be surprised at seeing that at all. Like I do think that is something that we could see this season for sure. But like we'll just have to see. You keep going down the list. Dan Moore is interesting. You can actually save $3 million. Now, do I really think they're going to move Dan Moore? Probably not. But what if you trade Dan Moore? And I've seen mocks where you trade Dan Moore and a pick for a wide receiver. Possibly, if you think the wide receiver is such an issue, and you think Fatanu, and you also think Broderick are ready to go at left and right tackle, and you believe in like a Dylan Cook, for example. But you're probably not moving Herbig and Dan Moore, and the cheapness of Dan Moore at the $3 million versus Herbig. They're at like $5.46 million overall as a cap hit, but being able to save $4 million on him. And the value of Dan Moore, particularly later in the season, like I wouldn't trade him now while you're letting Fatanu brew. If Fatanu's doing well and there's another guy that's impressed you, or you pick up another guy that's another tackle, a veteran that's being cut, then you can move Dan Moore closer to the trade deadline. I think Dan Moore is like a card they want to keep close to their chest right now. It's a bargaining chip for later on if anything happens, even in a good scenario. So it's kind of interesting from that perspective because Nate Herbig, Ogunjobi start to be names that like you think perhaps that's cuttable. The other thing that's interesting as well is that if you do a deal for Cam Heyward, then you can potentially play with his cap hit too. Couple other things. Obviously, they signed Cordell Patterson to keep him on the roster. You can save like $1.3 million. I don't think that's a big deal. I think the Steelers really care. That's not really going to change the game. But DeMarvin Leal is another person we talked about before, particularly if they're going to keep Ogunjobi. He could be cuttable. Now, it only saves you $1 million. It's not crazy amount of money. But at the end of the day, that million, when you've got only really of the $15.85 million, as we talked about, there's probably only about $5 million there the Steelers can do something. $1 million is pretty important. That gives you a 20% boost on top of what you were going to spend with the $5 million. So Leal could find himself in a bit of hot water here. I think definitely you could see him move to the practice squad. But that's kind of interesting. I think Lowry as well, if he doesn't perform, but I actually think they're going to really have to rely on Lowry. I'm really high on Lowry. I think he's a Chris Wormley 2.0, but better in terms of the role he can play for the Steelers. And that's the one bloke I did pass up before as I was going through it. DeMonte Casey. Now, Shannon and I talked about him a little bit last week on our Steelers Global Perspective. DeMonte Casey is someone that's going to have a real problem making this roster at his height, weight. He's not a big guy. He's not a traditional strong safety. He's a deep safety, a free safety. Maybe he can play a bit of slot corner. Got a reputation for doing egregious play. Now, had that 4-game suspension. Shannon brought up a really, really insightful point, an astute point last week on our Steelers Global Perspective show around the different player positions. And when it comes to Kazi, it could be a real problem for Kazi because if he does another thing, he'll get a lot more than a 4-game ban. So he's got a problem there. When you look at the makeup of the rest of the Steelers defense, and you can save $3 million there as well. Again, 3 + 5 is $8 million, right? So if you see it like that from that perspective, if you want to keep Herbig on the roster, you're not moving Ogunjobi. You're not planning on cutting Holcomb, which I've said I don't think they should do. But if you don't plan on moving Herbig, and there's a player that becomes available that you want, DeMonte KZ, that $3 million makes a lot more sense to cut KZ than does anyone else. KZ is also the wrong side at 30. I think he's 30, turns 31 this season. So that could be a really interesting player when it comes time for roster cut downs. Where does he fit? Can you get that cheaper? Can you get that with a Ryan Watts that can play special teams? He's not contracted beyond this year. Yes, he's definitely 31. It actually doesn't make a lot of sense to keep Kazi this year when you look at the actual salary cap numbers for the play, for the risk of having him on the team. Don't get me wrong, I think Kazi is a helpful depth piece, absolutely. But if you're looking to find money to improve corner, or you're looking at money to improve the position when it comes to wide receiver, that $3 million is going to come in handy. And I do think that the Steelers are in a position that unless they can do something crazy with Cam without restructuring a couple of other blokes' contracts, which I don't think they want to do and kick cans down the road, I don't think they want to cut Cole Holcomb either. I think they understand the importance of that linebacker position as well, because outside of Peyton Wilson, that's a lot of pressure to put on him. Like, they're going to have to do something about Ogunjobi, Herbie, Kazi. But I look at those three guys, I think Kazi's top of the pops in terms of guys you can cut because it's easiest. There's the most depth there. Then I think it's Ogunjobi. I think it's Nate Herbie because, again, I think there's depth there with McCormick. You've also got Spencer Anderson. You've obviously got Siamalu. You've got James Daniels. There's depth there. Ogunjobi there's less the depth, which helps him stay on the roster. But I don't think you see him on the roster next year. I do think he'll be cut postseason because of the roster bonus that he's due each year of over $3.5 million, which is paid on the second or the third day of the new league year, depending on the contract year that he has. But look, that's just a quick update on the Steelers salary cap. No one's talking about it. I want to talk about it because it does affect what we might see in terms of player movements. It's also helpful as we're going through mini camp and into training camp to basically mentor mini camp into training camp to sort of say, hey, who's performing, who's not, where are the Steelers looking at depth, because they only look at depth pieces as they start to construct the roster, particularly if they do want to make a move for a wide receiver, whether that's a top guy, whether that's also moving guys to be able to get a guy that becomes, on the cutting room floor, any of those different things. But you let me know in the comments what you think about that. Who do you want? Do you want none of these players cut? Do you want one or two of them cut? Who's the one that you think is holds the least amount of worth to the Steelers in 2024? I'd be keen to know that in the comments. I'm Matty P. As always, go Steelers.